Hey YouTube, this is Leo's Car Tips and I have a short video for a full remove and install of the front shocks on a 2008 to 2013 Cadillac CTS. Please like and subscribe if you find this video helpful and if you'd like to see more like this. Thanks, now let's get into it. The front struts are held in place by 5 18mm fasteners. Begin by removing the 3 bolts and 1 nut. Do the same on the passenger side and remove the cross member. The bottom of the strut assembly is secured to the lower control arm by 2 13mm bolts. The upper control arm is mounted to the strut assembly and they come out together. To disconnect it from the spindle and wheel hub assembly, use an 18mm wrench and a number 5 Allen wrench. This ball joint doesn't have a tapered shaft like other types, so it doesn't require any force to remove or install it. Upward pressure with the hydraulic jack under the wheel hub assembly will make the removal of the lower strut bolts much easier. This last bolt that holds the strut in place was hidden by the cross member. Back it off, but not all the way. Hold the strut with one hand while you remove the last few threads of the upper bolt and the strut will come out. I'm using a direct OEM replacement AC Delco shock. This is the same part for both driver and passenger side. I'll be replacing these by compressing the spring with the spring compression tool I rented at AutoZone. They're not the easiest to use, but they get the job done. Spray some WD-40 to help with the removal of the shock upper nut, and then it's time to compress the coil spring. To make room for the strut compression tool, remove the 2 nuts and bolts securing the upper control arm to the front strut. Compress the coil spring by gradually tightening each side until the compression of the coil removes the pressure from the shock and the shock can spin freely. Next, remove the nut holding the shock to the upper strut assembly. I had to get creative on removing this nut. Spraying some WD-40 helped to make this easier, but the proper tool would make it even better. Remove the old shock and replace with the new one, making sure to align the coil to the shock mount. It's important that the new shock is placed in the same orientation as the old one that you removed. Otherwise, the strut upper and lower alignment will not allow you to install it back in the car. I used a straight edge and made some marks as a reference so I can place the new shock in the proper orientation. Reinstall the upper strut assembly and secure it with the nut. Remove the compression tools from the coil and tighten the nut to the proper torque. And then reinstall the upper control arm. Install the strut assembly and secure it with 1 or 2 bolts from above. Using the floor jack, lift the upper control arm to close the gap to the shock lower mounting holes and install the 2 bolts. Now don't forget to secure the brake line and the bracket with a proper bolt. Install the remaining fasteners to the upper part of the strut, with the exception of the nut and bolt that hold the cross brace on each side. Then secure the upper control arm by tightening the nut. And finally install the cross brace with the remaining fasteners and you're done.